Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Dave.
Welcome to the January committee meetings at the State Board of Education. Our first committee meeting is the Rules Committee meeting, and I'm going to turn the chair over to Frank Griffin, Chair of the Rules Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll get started early, and we're going to do a little switch this morning. Item number 4, we're going to move to item number 1 because we have a guest that wants to speak to that matter. Senator John Alvarez is here with us. I'm going to let Tiffany introduce what this is about.
Good morning. This is a request to amend the Georgia K-12 standards for health to incorporate instruction in the life-saving potential of organ and tissue donation and provide information on the statewide organ donor registry system. After meetings with Senator John Albers and Ms. Sierra Pape, who is a high school student at Midtown High School and Atlanta Public Schools, the standards are being amended to provide high school students with information and instruction on organ and tissue donation before they are presented with this decision upon their visit to the Department of Motor Vehicles for their driver's license or permit. If approved, the standards will be posted for 30 days for public review and comment. And I will turn the podium over to Senator Albers and Ms. Pape.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here before you today, as well as skipping the agenda a bit. I want to begin by just telling you a brief story, and it's my story. Back in August of 2020, amidst the pandemic, my older son at the time was 24 years old. Both my boys went through Fulton County schools, and unfortunately, he started getting very ill. We didn't really know why, but he was a young man. They don't usually go to the doctor too much when you're 24. But that led to him losing a lot of weight, not being able to stay awake more than about an hour at a time without needing a nap, up to getting sick to his stomach and vomiting blood. That led us to the doctor's office, the emergency room, and ultimately at Cherokee Northside Hospital and the ICU. At that time, you weren't really supposed to be in hospitals. However, being a lifelong firefighter and EMT, I was allowed to go up into his room and hold his hand when the doctor gave me one of those nods to walk out in the hallway. I walked out of the hallway, he said, "John, all his organs are shutting down, and we don't know why. You need to prepare yourself. We don't know if he'll make it through the night." Probably the most horrifying thing that anyone can hear, especially when it's your child. Even today, I'm holding back tears as I talk to you. Thank the Lord that the wonderful professionals there in the middle of the night found out both of his kidneys had shut down. At that time, they had to do an emergency procedure and put him on dialysis at 24 years of age. But he was alive, and we were grateful. 11 days later of ICU, and then moving to a regular room, we were able to get him home. But we began the process of him going to a dialysis clinic 3 days a week. There were some victories along the way, though, when he got to eventually get a separate port put in and do that at home. But it was a real struggle, and it opened our eyes up to the process of what it meant to somebody who was in renal failure. We began the process of finding out whether my wife and I could be donors. It's a long and sometimes a little difficult process, but I'm proud in working with great folks like LifeLink, Georgia Transplant Foundation, American Kidney Foundation, others. We've now sped that up dramatically. And I got the greatest phone call of my life on July 1st of 2021 when the doctor said, "John, you're not just a match, you're a perfect match." The miracles that God laid in front of me throughout that time were longer than I could share with you today. However, 3 weeks later, we walked arm in arm into Emory University Hospital at 5 o'clock in the morning, and we had kidney transplant surgery. I gave Will, my son, what I commonly refer to as Lefty. And I'm proud to report that 2.5 years later, he is healed, he is healthy, and this is our life calling. This is what we're going to do for as long as God keeps us on this earth. From that, the next year, I passed the Giving the Gift of Life Act in Georgia, which is now law, which helps to have people protected if they're organ donors like myself, which you can give a kidney, you can give part of your liver. It's the only organ in your body that regenerates. Plus you can give stem cells, as I'm sure most of you know, and encouraging people to do that by never having to lose life insurance and make sure that they're protected. The interesting part is, as organ donors, believe it or not, we live longer than the average person. So it's hopefully a good point to do that. I am working now and passed it in 17 other states throughout the nation, and we're working on doing the same thing at the federal level in a different way to incent people to do that. So as we continue this process with all these great groups and great organizations, I was out of the blue contacted by this young lady next to me. Sierra called up and emailed me and said that she had an idea and a passion because of her life experiences, of how it's so important that we educate people on how this process works, because at any given day, there's about 115,000 people on the wait list to get a life-saving organ. My goal is we flip the wait list. There are people waiting in line to donate organs, so the minute someone needs it, they're there. Doing that process involves all ages and all groups of people. And when Sierra came to me with her idea, I was just blown away by the fact that someone could have this much passion, excitement, energy, and professionalism at a young age. Again, just showing what our wonderful schools here in Georgia are producing, which are our future leaders. I'm going to let her come up in a moment and talk through what she did, but this is a great way the process works. I want to thank each one of you and the board. We talked about different ways of accomplishing this through legislation. I'm a big believer we don't always have to change the law, and because we have such a great school board, we have such a great school superintendent and staff here, we're able to, I think, hopefully do this a way that is quicker, probably more effective, and maybe a little less bureaucratic. So again, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for allowing me to share my story and helping us to do something that, again, will save lives. And let me introduce you to Sierra. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you so much to Senator Albers for his kind words. And thank you to all of you for all you do to serve the students in Georgia. We all benefit from your leadership, time, and dedication to our education. So, like he said, yes, I do have a personal connection to organ donation, so I just wanted to share a bit about what got me to this point. Several years ago, my uncle received a heart transplant and was able to live several years longer. Simultaneously, my minister sadly passed away because she did not receive an organ in time. So this is when my family realized the true importance of organ donation. And then last year, as I filled out the form for my driver's permit, it asked the simple question, do you want organ donor displayed on your license? And I checked yes. I went back to my school and I talked to many of my peers, actually conducted a lengthy survey, and found that most people didn't even know if they signed up to be an organ donor or not, let alone the true meaning behind the question. So I found then, in order to increase organ donation rates across Georgia, we must improve the education systems for youth on the U.S. organ donation and transplantation system before they visit the DMV and the DDS, the critical time when you sign up to be an organ donor. And then after reading about Senator Albers' altruistic gift to his son, I emailed him and was so thankful to receive a response. We then began discussing legislation to make change. Today, almost 3,000 Georgians are waiting for an organ transplant. The state of Georgia Medicare is spending nearly $95,000 per person per year on kidney dialysis. Youth registration will move this needle for organ donation in the state of Georgia, saving thousands of lives. Nearly 90% of organ donation registrations come through the DMV. So it's essential that we find people and educate them in this time. Education about the system and the process will allow any student to make the right decision, the right informed decision for them. Incorporating this education in our curriculum can make this change, and education can save lives. Thank you so much.
Sierra, thank you for being here. Thank you. Senator Roberts, thank you so much. So are there any comments from any of the board members?
Senator, thank you again for taking the time and the trouble to come over here. It's already been a busy day for a lot of us. And thank you for representing all of your classmates and all of the other students at Midtown and students all over this state in the way that you did. This is going to change a lot of things for a lot of people. for the better. And you're the reason we do this. So we appreciate it when students step up and demonstrate the kind of leadership and the initiative, because that inspires all of us. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Selfishly, I'm losing senator as my senator in my district with the redrawing of maps. But you're a dear friend, thank you so much for what you do. And this is a very, very powerful testimony for what needs to be done. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Thank you all again. We appreciate, thank you for your service, for what you do for the state and for all of our students. Bless you. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, after hearing that testimony, I need a motion to approve this for posting.
So moved.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? It passes. Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Next item on the agenda would be original number 1.
I'm sorry, is passes or goes to the consent agenda?
It goes to consent agenda.
Consent.
Yeah, I was just,
I'm new at this.
I know, so,
Before we move on to the next item, I think they would give you all a chance to take a picture with Senator Albers and Ms. Pate.
Oh, yeah.
We love to do that.
This is great.
So much. It's so nice to meet you.
Oh. That doesn't get any better than that. Scott, great to see you, my friend. That's here.
oh, over here.
I know, we're only a year overdue, right? We're going this way? Okay. All right. Need to face this way? All right.
I'm gonna take a quick test shot. Smile for you.
Are you afraid of what you asked for?
Do 3 photos, pause, I'll do another batch of 3. Three, two, one. Hold that, please. 3 more. 3, 2.
Thank you. Thank you all guys. Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, man. Appreciate everything.
Fenna didn't take up this much room.
We do.
Did we do that curriculum?
Smell a lot better too.
Let's see.
We did when my kids went there.
Okay, if I shorten it off.
Fenna, you're shaking up a lot more room.
Do we do curriculum for driver? Do we do the curriculum for driver?
my table wrong.
Or is that done through DBS?
Oh, my childish jokes are.
No, I'm gonna ask Matt Jones that question, because is that a driver ed?
All right. Dr. Taylor?
Okay, so now we're moving back to the first item on the agenda, which is a request to adopt the rule amendment to State Board of Education Rule 160-3-1-.07, testing programs, student assessment. This rule is being amended to incorporate the following changes. A, to incorporate the mathematics course and the English language arts courses that will be assessed with the Georgia Milestones End of Course and Alternate Assessment 2.0. To provide an exemption from the ELA portion of the GKIDS assessment for kindergarten students being administered dyslexia and universal reading screeners, and to provide general cleanup updates related to the state's English language proficiency assessments and related guidance, the state's alternate assessment aligned with the alternate academic achievement standards and related descriptions, the dual enrollment, advanced placement, and international baccalaureate end of course exemption for U.S. history, and the names of reference testing administration materials. At the December 2023 meeting, the State Board approved the initiation of this rule to be posted for public review and comment, and it has been posted for at least 30 days.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Have a motion, is there a second? Second. Second, is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, I hear aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, the matter has passed and it will be pulled for a separate vote at the main meeting tomorrow. Is that correct? Because it is
That's
a.
correct.
That is correct.
Because it's for adoption. All right.
Item number two, new state board rule concerning Georgia Early Literacy Act requirements. Dr. Taylor?
Yes, this item is a request to adopt a new State Board of Education Rule 160-4-2.40, Georgia Early Literacy Act requirements. This rule was created to incorporate the literacy provisions prescribed in the Official Code of Georgia Annotated, Section 20-2-153.1, also House Bill 5, which is known as House Bill 538, the Georgia Early Literacy Act. This rule details the implementation of universal reading screeners, the provision of reading interventions for students with a significant reading deficiency, the approval of instructional materials, requirements for instructional supports and trainings for teachers, and notification for parents. At the December 2023 meeting, the State Board approved the initiation of this rule to be posted for public review and comment, and it has been posted for at least 30 days.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Is there any further discussion?
I've got a couple of questions
ma'am.
I just wanted to ask. Did we have any comments on that? I know we made it into a separate rule.
We did not, and I anticipate because the rule is essentially pulled from the language of the law, that there weren't any comments for the.
Okay. All right, let me just ask this, because with the screeners, and I made some notes about it when I just looked at this too. We've got an August date of 2024 that we're gonna roll out and test our students in kindergarten through third grade. But also there's, DOE is gonna do a free screener. And is it still coming out in August of 2024 too?
Yes, I mean, it's on schedule to be.
So how are we messaging this with our districts if, I mean, that's T-minus the day that it's coming out. So what are we saying to our districts? Because it seems like we got two roads going. One, that we've already got these universal screeners that people have already, purchased. Yeah,
I mean,
and
right
now-
now, yeah, I mean, currently, right, districts have the opportunity to purchase from the list. Nothing that stops them from adopting and putting that in their budget for this upcoming year. I think once we kind of see what the governor's budget looks like, then it'll give other districts time to make some changes perhaps. But we won't know that until we actually see the governor's budget, what that looks like. But as far as that, districts can be reassured that we will have a free screener that they can use for this upcoming school year. And I don't know if Dr. Timberlake, can you provide an update of where, I guess, DRC is with the development of the screener, please?
Good morning. As you all know, we've been implementing DRC Beacon as a formative interim assessment for no charge to districts for a number of years. This past year, we've been working to expand that to grades K through 2, as well as implement a screener that will cover both the dyslexia and universal screening requirements in K3. We're currently field testing that. We've got, I think, a little over 50 districts that have signed on to help us field test that so we can complete development with the plan to make it available statewide by August.
Okay. So do we already know, or are we doing, I guess that would probably come in with April. Do we know what districts already have as for screeners?
As far as selecting a
Yeah,
screener?
no, what they already have, because a lot of them, have screeners in their system that they use. Do we know what they're using already?
We haven't seen, I mean, as far as from the list, or what are they just using in general
No, what
right
they're
now?
using in general.
Dr. Timberlake, I don't think we have that down to that list, because again, with private vendors and, I mean, we don't have control over that part, except in the future,
Yeah.
from the list, they are gonna have to choose. So if they're using something that's outside of that list currently, they will have to make a change.
Okay.
And that'll be within their budget process, but, like I said, I mean, as far as our obligation, at the state level, we have to provide a free screener, and we will have a free screener for our districts, by August.
Okay, but the screeners that we got back from the deal center only gave us 3 that really hit the target and 2 others that we probably needed some more information on, but the others probably needed even more. So are the districts, I mean, I guess y'all sent that out, they saw what was in the,
Yeah, I mean, they have a complete, scope of what is out there with their, I guess how they align, and they'll be looking at, of course, for right now, they'll have to, look at their finances. Just depending on how much a screener costs, that may or may not limit or will limit what they can and cannot purchase. And that's based on cost. But once again, I think we probably need to wait until we see the governor's budget, and then our districts will definitely have more insight if there's any flexibility or any options as far as enhancement that goes with that. But as of now, they have the list that was approved by the board. They have to make that call, and but they will have a free option should they choose to select what DRC is developing right now.
okay, that was one question I had. And then I had a question on the reading intervention, and this is just y'all, in these tiered reading intervention plans, how are we gonna determine, like, for example, if I'm doing a screener and I've tested a student, say 3 students, and they did not come up with the mastery rate, and say it was in something like oral reading fluency. 2 of them didn't succeed, and 1 was sort of somewhere, was teetering maybe could or couldn't. Are we gonna come up with a cut score? How are we gonna determine how that is done? Is that gonna be done through local?
That would be through the Lexile. But again, I mean, because again, as far as looking at whether you're proficient, not proficient, that came from the decision to adopt the Lexile's stretch bands. So once again, that information will be up there, and I believe Dr. Timberlake, Lexile is the measurement that these screeners will be using. Is that correct?
Those are slightly separate. So we've got the Lexiles starting at grade 3 for on-grade level reading for all those purposes. The screeners, and April will have to forgive me, I'm not a complete expert, but they, at least the one that we're developing as an option, will meet all of the individual requirements of the dyslexia and universal reading screen. It'll essentially provide kind of a dashboard approach so educators can see all those different elements and where students fall. And then I believe there is some type of overall designation that kind of recommends students either for more screening or additional services.
But if I'm not mistaken as well, we currently have the Georgia Literacy, not council, but the academy. So teachers are being trained. So the intent is that as they look and they evaluate whether it's a strength or a weakness, hopefully through, again, with the provision that our K-3 teachers are being trained, then they'll be able to identify whether it's strength or weakness, and again, how to address that strength or weakness based on the information provided. Again, that goes out to all, we'll be going out to all K-3 teachers.
I mean, because we've got, it seems like it's just January, but August will be here before we know it, and then December the 24th will be here when we're looking at those instructional materials too. So
Yeah.
Those are just things that I think we need to maybe still have some conversation about as we move along, and as y'all are working on those things, just to kind of keep us abreast of those things that are coming about.
Because again, once again, the standards have not rolled out yet, so again, that will be kind of a joint process of making sure we have our teachers properly trained with the new standards.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, in my excitement about running the meeting, I forgot that we don't vote in here, so I'm sorry about the other. I appreciate you indulging me for that. But we'll pull this item for a separate vote for tomorrow, if that's all right. Moving on to the next item, Dr. Taylor, the CTAE standard.
Item number 3 is a request to adopt the CTAE standards for elementary business and office administration. These proposed courses, which were developed by a team of teachers and industry partners, are designed to expose elementary students to age-appropriate content within the CTAE Business Management and Administration cluster. The standards were approved for public review and comment at the December 2023 meeting of the State Board and have been posted for at least 30 days.
Any comments from the board?
Just again, I say this every month when we adopt one of these. This is so exciting every single time we adopt one of these pathways that goes down into younger grades, because one of our biggest responsibilities, I think, is to make sure that young people understand what kind of jobs are out there. They need to have a great basic education. They need to have a great advanced education, but they also need to know what to do with that education. And the age-appropriate, earlier way that we bring it forward is very exciting to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? This item to the consent agenda without objection.
We're posting it for adoption, so.
No, it's consent for the standards. It goes on the consent agenda.
All right, item number 5.
And, I'm sorry?
Item number 5.
Item number 5 is a request to approve an administrative waiver for RESA change for Emmanuel County School System. This is a request to approve the RESA change for Emmanuel County School System from Central Savannah River Area RESA to First District RESA. The Emmanuel County Board of Education has determined that the needs of Emmanuel County are closely aligned with the services provided by the First District RESA. The demographics of Emmanuel County are comparable to the districts in the First District RESA service area, and the location of First District RESA is closer to Emmanuel County. The Official Code of Georgia Annotated, Section 20-2-270, authorized the State Board to establish the service area of each RESA as a geographically defined area of the state, and requires local education agencies located within the designated geographical area to be members of that RESA. The boards of control of both the Central Savannah Area RESA and the First District RESA have approved the change request from Emmanuel County. If approved, this change will go into effect on July 1st, 2024.
Any questions or comments about Taylor? No objection. We'll move that to the consent agenda unless I'm confused, Mr. Chairman. That's all we have of this committee.
I knew this would happen sooner or later, and it's happened sooner. I want to make sure, now, we can put this on the consent agenda, correct?
The standards, yes.
Yes.
The only item that has to be pulled for a separate vote is the adoption of rules.
The adoption of rules, okay. So now that we're done with the Rules Committee agenda, the 5 items, remind me that, of which ones we're going to move to the consent agenda and which ones are going to be for a separate vote.
Okay, the items as you have listed, 1 through 5, on this piece of paper, will be items 1 and 2 pulled for a separate vote. The other 3 will be put on the consent agenda. 3, 4, and 5 will be put on the consent agenda.
Okay, is everybody okay on that? Nick, I know you're listening in. Everybody okay on that?
I'm good.
Okay. All right, so, having said, we'll move along with that protocol for tomorrow, okay? All right. Superintendent Woods, do you have a presentation to make on CCRP?
Yes, Dr. Timberlake?
And board members, since this is related to the governor's office's press release, recently, it's connected to that, is it not? We thought we'd go ahead and put it today during the Rules Committee meeting, because tomorrow we're under a little bit of a time crunch because of some other activities that happen, like the State of the State address, things like that. So, with that said, Dr. Timberlake, great to have you with us.
Thank you, and good morning again, and thank you for the opportunity to provide you with a brief update on Georgia's School Accountability System, the College and Career Ready Performance Index, or CCRPI. This is the first year we have had a full CCRPI release since the COVID-19 pandemic began. Our last full release was in 2019, and then in spring of 2020, the pandemic began. We canceled testing that year, and we did not have a CCRPI. In 2021, testing resumed, but it was heavily impacted by the pandemic. So again, we did not have a CCRPI, though we did release some CCRPI-related data as it was available. 2022 is what I would call our first set of post-pandemic results. We did have a full testing administration, we had strong participation, but since so many aspects of CCRPI rely on multiple years of data, even though we had a CCRPI, it was still modified as some indicators and components were unavailable due to the need for multiple years of data. So now we're here to 2023 and we're back to our first full CCRPI release since 2019. This fall, the U.S. Department of Education approved Georgia's request to amend our state ESSA plan, making several changes to CCRPI. There were several goals behind this amendment. The primary one being we wanted to recognize that the performance of a district or school is more than its sum total. By moving towards a dashboard approach to accountability, we wanted to encourage all stakeholders to both celebrate strengths as well as identify opportunities for improvement at their school instead of potentially obscuring those strengths and weaknesses through a single score. Other changes to our system serve to acknowledge schools that are expanding opportunities for students, capture the growth of students with significant cognitive disabilities, support our state's strong commitment to workforce and economic development, recognize the growth of high-achieving students, align the expectations of our performance improvement targets, and provide stable and sustained support for our federally identified schools. Perhaps the biggest change to CCRPI this year is the elimination of the overall single 0 to 100 score. As I mentioned, it's our hope that with this dashboard approach to accountability, stakeholders will be encouraged to really dig into the data, better understand the performance of the students at their schools, both celebrate the strengths as well as identify the areas for continued improvement. While we've eliminated the single score, we have maintained the 0 to 100 scores for indicators and components. And as you can see here, if you were to go to the CCRPI reports, you would be able to obtain that information for the overall components, the indicators, and if you were to click View Details, you would be able to further disaggregate the data by different reporting categories, student groups, and things of that nature. A few additional changes. The literacy indicator is now called the At or Above Grade Level Reading Indicator. This measures the percent of students demonstrating reading ability at or above grade level. This change aligns the CCRPI literacy indicator with both the Georgia Milestones on grade level reading measure and the state board defined state literacy metric. Also, as required by the U.S. Department of Education, this literacy indicator includes Georgia alternate assessment scores for students who participate in that assessment. The elementary and middle school beyond the core indicator measures the percent of students earning credit in courses beyond the traditional academic core. We have now expanded this to include some additional courses. In elementary school, we have now include career exploratory and computer science courses, and in middle school, we now include computer science courses as well. The high school accelerated enrollment indicator measures the percent of students earning credit in accelerated enrollment courses. We are now including Cambridge courses in addition to advanced placement, international baccalaureate, and dual enrollment courses. The high school pathway completion indicator measures the percent of students completing a pathway in either advanced academics, CTAE, fine arts, or world language. We will be updating this indicator such that students completing a CTAE pathway in a high demand area will earn extra credit towards this indicator. This will provide incentive for schools to offer high-demand CTAE pathways in support of Georgia's workforce development efforts. And we will implement this beginning with the 2025 CCRPI once those high-demand CTAE pathways are identified by the department in conjunction with business and industry and TCSG. The high school college and career readiness indicator measures the percent of students demonstrating college and career readiness through one of multiple opportunities. Those include entering the technical college or university system without needing remediation, earning a readiness score on the ACT, SAT, AP, or IB exams, passing an end-of-pathway assessment leading to an industry-recognized credential, or completing a work-based learning experience. Starting this year, we are excited to now be able to include military readiness through obtaining a military readiness score on the ASVAB. Anywhere between 10 and 20,000 Georgia students, high school students, take the ASVAB every year, and we're very excited for this opportunity to include military readiness in our school accountability system. Finally, just a few other updates pertaining to the progress and closing gaps components of CCRPI. We've updated the ELA and mathematics progress indicators to award maximum growth points for students who achieve at the distinguished learner level. This recognizes the achievement and growth required for students to score at the highest levels on the Georgia Milestones Assessment. Second, we are incorporating students with significant cognitive disabilities who participate in the Georgia Alternate Assessment into the ELA and math progress indicators using a categorical gains model. We'll continue to use the student growth percentile model for Georgia Milestones and now the categorical gains model for the GAA. Both models are valid and appropriate given the characteristics of each assessment. We've updated the closing gaps improvement target formula to align with the maintenance level of 90%, and we've also set new baselines for those annual improvement targets using the 2022 data. Finally, we're rewarding districts and schools that meet closing gaps improvement targets for the most at-risk student populations. That's a summary of all of the updates. The 2023 CCRPI was released in December, and those reports are available online for any stakeholder who wishes to dig into that data. So thank you, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Thank you very much. Great presentation. With regard to the ASVAB, I'm glad to see that emphasis being placed. I had the opportunity to go on the tour with the United States Army at Fort Carson, and I know that Ms. Petty had a chance to do the Navy tour. And one of the things that I think each of us learned was with regard to the ASVAB, number one, how few test takers there really were. And then secondly, how few were actually well prepared. I think the passage rate is like in the 30% range. And this is qualifying for entry into military service. Sadly, of that 30%, only a smaller fraction are qualifying on the physical side. So what's not well known is that ASVAB is also an incredible assessment with regard to skill sets. And regardless of whether students are choosing a military pathway, taking the ASVAB actually is a very, very good thing to do because it does open up and shows you where your strengths may lie and may help guide you and so forth. So anything that we can do to help promote greater test taking in that regard would be awesome.
Yeah, our hope is that this will grow. This is a change just with this year, and districts provide that data to us. So being the first time it was new to them, they are just building their internal systems to be able to collect and provide the data. So we're hoping as we move forward, military readiness will be more of a prominent aspect in our schools.
Thank you.
Has this been sent to us?
No.
I'd love for it to be sent to the board.
Yeah, I'd like it today so I can look at it. I can't wrap my head around all of it.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Alice, I've got a question. Can I? On the redesign of the CCRPI in 2018 and 19, are we still, I noticed you had progress in closing the gap. Is content mastery still part of that?
Yes. Yes.
So how well students are performing at their own grade level?
Yes.
And then, so it's content mastery and progress and closing the gaps and readiness and graduation rate. Those are, so you're not gonna have a single score. You're going, how are we gonna do this?
That's right. There we go. Let me just, I know we have several new board members. So we do have those 5 components, as you mentioned. Content mastery is achievement, basically proficiency rates on our state assessments. Progress is growth, the extent to which students are growing from one year to the next. Closing gaps is about meeting annual improvement targets for individual student groups. We calculate individual targets for every student group at every school. It's a 3% target, so it's customized to every group and every school where they are. We're looking for, sustained annual improvements. Readiness, we went over a lot of the readiness indicators today, so those are other measures of readiness at the elementary, middle, and high school level. And then, of course, high school also has graduation rate. The one change we made is we no longer have one single score. We have instead more of a dashboard approach where we provide the scores for each of the components and the individual indicators. The one place where there's an implication to that has to do with identifying the federally identified schools for support. Since we no longer have a single score, we identify the lowest 5% of schools. We now have what we call a staged approach where we go one component at a time. So essentially, for example, first we take content mastery and rank the schools and find the lowest X%. I don't have it here. I think it's maybe 20%. We take the lowest 20% of schools on content mastery. They move to stage 2 where we then rank them on progress. And then again, we take a cut of the lowest schools on progress. So we work our way through each of the components, starting with achievement, then progress and closing gaps, readiness, and graduation rate to identify those low-performing schools for support.
Okay, so going back to the beginning and developing and proficient and distinguished, because is that where if you're in beginning, you get no points, right?
Right.
And then so from something to something, you got point by. Help me out here.
Sure. Yeah, for content mastery, we use what we call an achievement indicator score, essentially. If you're a beginning learner, you get 0 points. A developing learner gets half a point. Proficient learners get 1, and distinguished learners get 1.5 points. We really wanted to incentivize moving every single student to the next level, no matter where they are. Whereas if you just have a straight proficiency rate, you tend to find schools focus on the bubble students and don't focus on the really low or high achievers. So by having the phased point approach, it encourages moving every student to the next level. So those are the content mastery scores you see there. That 64.7% is the content mastery score at the elementary school level for the state.
Say that again.
The 64.7 that you see on the screen here, that's the elementary school overall content mastery score for the state.
Ooh, look you, Matt. I might need to look at this a lot.
And if you were to go to the reports and click on view details, it would disaggregate it for you. It would show the percent of students in each of those 4 levels. It would show it to you by student group. You'd be able to get more details.
So from 2018, we've been doing some things. I mean, obviously we sent something to the feds but we really haven't been talking about it. So this is great today that you brought this to our attention, because in 2018 we'd already changed this about how many times, 4 or 5. And so then COVID came, as you said. So all of those indicators and factors and accountability measures are progress, I guess, is now, whatever. It's a lot.
I agree, but refined, like what you were saying about the high demand jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, remember there's an initial report, but that was 7 years ago. Those industries have changed, and it's gonna be reflective in, our accountability, which is great.
Well, and I think to your point, Mason, it allows us as schools where we just don't get complacent with what we are offering. But I think as the job market changes, the demands change, and so that will better allow our districts to make sure that we're offering the correct courses that are out there that actually lead to a successful job for our kids.
And not what's just comfortable.
Yeah, well, I like to.
Or convenient.
I can make a great candlestick, okay? That's my claim to fame in school. So we want to make sure that if logistics, and again, of course, we heard this morning with the governor, with healthcare, I mean, there are areas of high demand, and I would even say teaching. Those are things that we want to make sure that our districts are paying attention to what is going on, whether that be locally or statewide. I've not seen anybody that specializes in that.
Dr. Timberlake, and I may be early because the press release just from the governor's office just went out recently about high demand. How much flexibility, or do we even know yet, will districts have for determining, or is this going to be done regionally? Or by district, or is there a statewide list of high demand careers? Do we have that answered yet, or how are those decisions gonna be made?
It'll be both. There'll be a statewide high demand list, and then there'll be a regional list as well, because we know certain regions of the state have their nuances. That's something the governor's office is taking the lead on. That's what we're looking at.
Okay.
And the key point is, it's incentivizing the high demand, it's not penalizing school districts for not offering the high demand.
Correct.
So the districts won't see a penalty.
Ad valorem. Got it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. And yeah, we'll get, all the board members will have the access to this PowerPoint. Mr. Griffin, anything else on the agenda on Rules Committee?
No, sir, the business of the Rules Committee is done.
All right. With that being said, we will adjourn the Rules Committee. I'm gonna need to entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So moved, but we obviously need make a motion that we adjourn to executive session for personnel. Do we have any legal matters? Legal? Any
Appeals, yeah,
appeals? We don't have any property matters.
no property matters.
So for personnel, legal, and appeals.
Second. Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we'll adjourn for executive session. We'll reconvene at 1 o'clock for budget.
nurse.
See?
One nurse in the house, Zoe Bryant.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
I stand.
I will now entertain a motion to exit executive session.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Downey, second by Donaldson. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, it's time for our budget committee meeting, and I'm very happy to introduce our new budget committee chair, Leontay Ben. Ben, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
New Year.
Welcome to the January Budget Committee meeting. And I'll just turn it over to Russ. The floor is yours, sir.
We'll go ahead and start with item 1, which is our Office of State Administrative Hearings, contract renewal. Due process hearings are designed to resolve differences between concerned parties in the identification, evaluation, placement, or provision of a free and appropriate public education for a student with a disability. The total contract amount is not to exceed $400,000.
Any questions? Any objections?
Moving this to the consent agenda.
Absolutely. Item 2,
All right, item 2 is a contract renewal with Pingora Consulting. The purpose of this contract is to provide targeted, independent monitoring and investigation services regarding compliance with Part B of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. The total contract amount is not to exceed $336,000.
thank you. Any questions? No objections? Move to consent agenda. Item 3,
All right, this is a grant amendment. This is our FY 2022 American Rescue Plan Homeless Children and Youth 2 amendment. Available FY 2022 American Rescue Plan Homeless Children and Youth administrative funds will be dispersed to LEAs to increase the ARP HCY2 sub-recipient amounts. The amount of this grant amendment is $3 million, which brings the total grant not to exceed $18,667,844.
thank you. Any questions?
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Okay.
The additional funds, are these administrative funds that we did not use, so we're distributing them out?
To the
like we've done in the
districts.
past?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Any other questions? Any objections? Move it to the consent agenda. Item 4,
All right, item 4 is a grant amendment. This is our FY '24 Individuals with Disabilities Education Act funding for students with disabilities for new and expanding charters adjustment. The IDA provides LEAs with supplemental funding to support the additional costs with educating students with disabilities. This amount of the amendment is $644,885, which brings the total grant amount not to exceed $384,280,433.
thank you. Any questions? Any objections? Move it to the consent agenda. Item 5,
All right, item 5 is our grant for Building Opportunity in Out-of-School Time, or BOOST. BOOST grants are designed to expand access to and improve the quality of after-school and summer learning opportunities for Georgia students. The total grant amount is not to exceed $16,930,078.
any questions?
Yes. Could you explain the allocation sheet that's attached there?
To the BOOST.
Yeah, is it boost funding out? Yeah.
Matt Cardoza.
Oh, thanks, man. Take your time.
Yes, so the allocation sheet, you should see year 3 for summer enrichment, you should see year 3 for after-school programs. Those are additional funding for a few of the grantees. And then you will see targeted, so there are some that are do you have a question about those?
Go ahead, yeah.
So then there are some that are targeted, specifically, one is for foster care students, and then there are some for like juvenile detention students.
So that's the targeted year 3 summer enrichment, that last column?
Correct, that's right. For youth detention students.
Okay, so that is only for that. That's why
Correct,
everybody
correct.
else
Those
is-
two different targeted ones are,
Okay.
one's for youth detention, that's right, and then one's for specific for
All right,
foster.
thank you. That makes sense.
I have a follow-up question on that. There are, in that same summer enrichment, there are 3 that are over $2 million.
Mhm.
So those are very large in comparison to the others. Like, tell me what GRPA's is.
So those should be the statewide ones, so they're serving statewide populations of students versus most of those on there are very more specific regional.
Okay.
And I can get you more detail about the specific one.
Yeah, I'd like to see the ones that are
Sure.
over $2 million.
Sure, sure.
Any other questions? Any objections? Consent agenda. Item 6.
All right, item 6 is our grant amendment for our FY '24 Title I Part A school improvement grants. The purpose of this grant amendment is to provide financial resources to federally identified schools that have not previously been federally identified as targeted support and improvement, comprehensive support and improvement, or Tier 4. The grant amendment is $7,010,000, which brings the total grant amount not to exceed $36,715,256.
Thank you. Any questions? Any objections? Move to the consent agenda. Item 7.
All right, item 7 is a grant for K-5 numeracy development grant. The purpose of this grant is to help districts and schools acquire resources to support K-5 students' development of foundational numeracy skills. The total grant amount is not to exceed $2,997,201.
Thank you. Any questions?
Mr. Chair, I have a question. I see this as ESSER funded, so we see this as being a one-time grant.
Yes. Yes.
To support the new math standards that were adopted by the board. This grant is to support the math standards that were adopted by the board.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any objections? Move it to the consent agenda. Item 8.
All right, item 8 is our L4GA 2019. This is Cohort 1, Year 5 awards. The Literacy for Learning, Living, and Leading in Georgia 2019 grant funds are being awarded to local education agencies participating in Cohort 1 for the continuation of their projects as described in their literacy plans. This total grant amount is not to exceed $20,684,076.
Thank you. Any questions?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
So this is year 5 of a 5-year grant, right?
Correct.
Do we have an opportunity to renew it after that, or does this program
Think
cease?
So right now, we're waiting, we'll see when the US Ed comes out with an additional grant, but, JC, if you wanna, this grant's been extended through help me out.
Yeah, this is the last year of funding for this grant. We have 1 year extension for completing the work, but there is no additional funding coming for that one. We are waiting for the USDA to put the next request for proposal for the next grant.
So we're waiting, it could end.
Yeah, we will apply.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any objections? Okay, we'll move to the consent agenda. Item 9.
All right, item 9 is our L4GA. This is Cohort 2, Year 4 awards. The Literacy for Learning, Living, and Leading in Georgia 2019 grant funds are being awarded to local education agencies participating in Cohort 2 for the continuation of their projects as described in their literacy plans. This total grant amount is not to exceed $13,511,604.
Thank you. Any questions?
Russ, kind of these are years 4 and 5 of some of these literacy grants. We should have some pretty good data on how they're working, obviously, we're not prepared for presentation on that here. We didn't ask, but I'd be interested to see, and part of this, I know, and part of the course, and whether they get refunded in the schools is, are they meeting their objectives? Are they meeting their goals? Kind of see what type of progress, what's the good, the bad. I won't call it any ugly because hopefully we're all progressing, but what's, are there any shining nuggets in there that we've learned? And maybe that would be good for next meeting on there, just because this is something the state, and as somebody who just sent an awful lot of money to the IRS, federal dollars have been in. So I'd be interested to see kind of an update of where we're at, what have we learned, what type of progress are we having?
Just a quick comment. I'm with you, Mike, because these plans, they're based on literacy plans formed in 2019. I'm interested in how our recent legislation has informed and changed like these last final years of their literacy plans. So that information would be good.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Gunn, we have a very special guest here today, and I would ask that we press the pause button on our budget committee meeting to give our literacy, Council on Literacy Chair, Scott Johnson, an opportunity to introduce a very, very distingued guest.
Speaking of literacy.
Thank you all for a moment of, to interrupt. I know what the importance of the stuff that y'all are doing, but we just happen to have in the building today, we dedicated a room to Miss Sandra Deal at GOSA on the 9th floor. Had this distinguished gentleman, and he said, I'd like to go by and say hey. So you all, don't need no introduction, you're Nathan Deal.
Thank you for allowing me to.
Podium's yours.
Thank you for allowing me to interrupt your meeting. I was in the vicinity and just wanted to say hello to all of you and to thank you for what you do. I know you are told the importance of what you do, but you're not told that often enough. So I appreciate what you're doing. We have a great state. We have great educational institutions in our state, and we just have to continue to support them and to try to make things better. And I know that's what you're trying to do in your meetings such as this one. Thank you for letting me stop in and say hello to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we get a picture?
Do that? Oh, yeah. I still remember how to do that.
Stand up, stand up.
Your daughter, they did it.
Right, yeah, right.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
How about the Braves?
They just have to be somebody with a phone.
Who's gonna take it? She's gonna get it.
Take it. Worst case.
I think she went up to 15. It's different. He'll take it. Oh, I'm sorry.
All right, everybody said
Now we got the fresh. Get in here, Scott. Scott, get in here.
Scott,
Get in this picture, Scott. Come on.
Alright, do 3 photos and then 3 photos. 3, 2, 1. Hold that, please. 3, 2, 1. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, darling.
Thanks, Nate.
I will. Thank you, Scott. Just for the record, tell the governor he's welcome anytime. Anytime he's in the vicinity. All right, Mr. Benton, thank you for indulging me on that. On a personal privilege, we're back on schedule.
Leontay, I never have a governor during my budget.
And it's his first one. His first meeting, he has to.
They never come during my meeting.
Let's go.
Congratulations.
Yeah, well, tell him that.
Thank you, Cal. Wait till you see who Scott's got coming to church.
As he sets his cookie down. Yeah, what?
All right, so item 9 will be moved to the consent agenda. Item 10.
All right, item 10 is a grant for our statewide longitudinal data system modernization. This is a request to receive grant funds from the U.S. Department of Education for the purpose of modernizing Georgia Department of Education's technology platforms and applications. The total amount of the grant is $1,125,359.
Question.
First, hallelujah. I know it's well needed. So this is 1.1 million in federal funds. Do we have I read through the agreement. It's very broad in its scope. Where are we starting first with what's the plan for this? It's Keith. All right.
Good morning. Could you please repeat the question?
Sure. I mean, this is well needed. The system's needed to update its predecessor to even any of us being on here, because it really goes back to 2009 when we started it. But what is this? Where are we going to concentrate these funds? What are they going to be used for?
This is going to be to upgrade all of our SLDS reporting, our dashboards, what we call Georgia Insights and My Georgia Insights, which is the individualized and personalized reporting. And we'll also be doing a lot of work. CEDS is the Common Educational Data Standard, which is in our data collections world. That is the standard by which we must report to the federal government. And a lot of the work to take the data that we collect and convert it to that standard to report it to the federal government is done manually. It's a lot of sweat equity that goes into that process, and we're planning to use a lot of these funds to use technology to do a lot of that work instead of it being such a manual process. There's a lot of progress that's been made in technology tools to allow it to happen. And so that is primarily going to be for the reporting and also for sending that up to the federal government.
So software and upgrades to the reporting and processes and that to help.
Yes, sir. All the data visualization side of that work.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Any objections? Okay, item 10 will be moved to the consent agenda. Item 11.
All right, item 11 is a contract amendment with Emory University. The purpose of this contract amendment is to provide funds for technical assistance for additional school-based health center grantees identified to be part of round 2 cohort. The amount of the contract amendment is $182,042, which brings the total contract amount not to exceed $301,612.
Thank you. Any questions?
Russ, I got some specific questions. I don't know who's.
I think Mary Lauren is, or Justin's online as well, I believe.
Yeah, Justin.
I'm here.
Oh, Mary.
Hey, Mary Lauren.
Justin's in listen mode. He's at a conference.
You're obviously changing this. I know there's been some challenges in the previous getting some folks to apply. I see the next item is some dollars being spent on a SBHC. This additional funds, I guess, is the use of it going to be to do more of the same? Is Emory going to be looking at how to broaden this? Because we have talked about in our meetings with this for these dollars that with the MOU that's signed, some of these areas could be used telehealth to help meet some of these requirements with some changes and upgrades to schools, which may be real appropriate, say more rural environments. And I'll just even go ahead and jump to the next one, because we've got $600,000 going to Clark County, which in my opinion, could be a very successful brick and mortar school-based healthcare center because of the locale, the area it'll draw from. It's got a lot of good things that could probably help it, but I'm not gonna pick on, I won't pick on Gray, Georgia, because it is, I'll pick on Mr. Downey, but some of those areas that could use school-based health centers but don't have the capacity to really support the brick and mortar or have the, is that gonna be part of the Emory, or is it gonna be, I mean, I'm just gonna be blunt, say, is it more of the same that we've already had struggles with trying to show these areas where they have to put the brick and mortar in, they have to have the people there, they have to have that, because I've really questioned the sustainability of those type. Again, Clark County, I could see it being very sustainable and a great thing there. Is the Emory, I guess the direct question is the Emory training and workshops and it going to be broadening it all, or is it gonna be redoing what we've already done, just trying to get it again and get more people in for the traditional brick and mortar school-based healthcare center?
Yeah, so great questions. And as you see, we have several items related to school-based health centers this month. And this contract amendment is to add funds for technical assistance for our new cohort of grantees. So I think that's probably one of the following items. We have 17 new grantees that are going to be awarded to start the process of planning. So they're being awarded planning grants. 14 of those are rural districts. And so this is our third contract that we've had with Emory to provide technical assistance. We've always partnered with them to provide training as well to our grantees. So they provide that technical assistance throughout the planning grant process, which typically is a year. But as you see in our Clark County example, Clark County has done this before, so they're moving along a little bit faster than some of the other grantees. They also provide, once the planning year kind of continues on, about business planning and sustainability. So they're really providing the support to the grantees to set them up for success when they get going with building out that actual brick and mortar center. And we just didn't have the numbers for the current cohort or this upcoming cohort back in September. So we wanted to go ahead and get that rolling. In that original contract that was brought to the board in September, we also built funds in there to do some what we're calling train the trainer workshops that Emory will facilitate, because right now they've always been the subject matter experts in this space and an excellent partner in this work. But it would be our goal to expand some of this wealth, if you will, around the state. So perhaps at Mercer or Augusta, somewhere in South Georgia, that we could train some trainers at medical institutions or relevant organizations to be able to train locally districts that might be interested in going down this path. So this is technically more of the same, and this is ESSER funded because our governor's office funds, as you know, are strictly for that brick and mortar center. So we don't have a sustainable funding source for this moving forward because of that restriction. But you will see, like I said, for round 2, these planning grants that are coming is a highly rural population, a handful of districts that are still meeting that CSI, TSI promise eligibility.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
It does, most of it, because when you mentioned additional things that are not on this agenda, I don't know which ones you're talking about that are coming, that are in the pipeline. It's not listed on Assembly, the next one, and the last item we have after this one. Well, there's 2 more after this one, and one's Safer Schools, and one is the Clark County one. That's all we have left on business today. But I guess that's where I would, just maybe try to respectfully disagree. In the MOU, it lines out, I don't have it in front of me, but I've read it several times, I'll say 10 different items to be considered for this grant, this federal grant that the school-based healthcare center needs to be able to do, and needs to be able to meet 7 of them. I'm just going as the round numbers are probably pretty close. And I know if a school, for instance, in a remote county had an area that they could isolate within the school, designated for the school-based health care center, and use telemedicine to help facilitate that, not have to have somebody in there all the time, that the way I've read the MOU very numerous times, that could be considered under the MOU with OPB, school-based health center grant. And this is, I mean, going back to months and months ago when we've had this and had this discussion, we talked about that, and Justin was sitting back there about opening it up in the next cohort, and we need to consider that. And I don't see that in here. We're missing a great opportunity, I think, and I would be willing to try to ask, because we've got some great, you mentioned Mercer. Mercer's been working with telemedicine and one of our telemedicine providers to get in, and as one of, as a significant telemedicine provider in the state of Georgia, global, I mean, it's global. And they're all over, and they've done some great things with some great schools. And being able to do that and implement that, whether it's through Anthem, whether it's through another provider, whoever, there's some really good things going on in rural counties that we're missing the opportunity for with these. I think we're missing the opportunity for with some of these dollars that meet the MOU requirements. And going back several months ago, we asked about that and were told we need to probably, there were no promises. I'm not putting any words in as far as that goes, but we talked about that and talked about potentially opening that up to some of those rural districts to be able to do that without having to do the brick and mortar. Because I know of specific examples all over the state that what I've seen that Emory has pushed and some of these others have pushed, I think, again, could do well in Clark, but have failed because of sustainability. When the government dollars ran out, they didn't have the sustainability because all the heavy expense load in that to sustain a large brick and mortar facility where they could sustain this district or a couple of districts together doing it and getting a nurse practitioner to spend days here, days here, days here, days here, and be able to serve the needs of those rural kids and staff members where they don't have to leave school and travel a long ways away to get some very basic care. And that's where I'm trying to make sure we keep putting that up and push on that. So I guess that's where my real question is. You answered the part of it, but see Matt's coming to the podium. I'll give him opportunity to speak.
Yeah, so we are supportive of telehealth services. I think Mike, you've sat down with the superintendent, y'all have had those discussions. I think the thing to remind the board on this is GEARS funds, so this is coming up from the governor's ESSER funding. They had very strict parameters around what they wanted the money to be spent on and not to be spent on, and we've had numerous meetings with them on that. Their charge to us was physical school-based health centers facilities. And not ancillary cost. And that we brought up telehealth as one of those things that we don't see as ancillary, we see as another way to provide services. But where this is in that conversation is they're having discussions internally on their end, and they have not given us the green light yet. I think as soon as we get approval from them, we're more than willing to open this up to look at other services. But we just got to keep in mind it's their money and they have certain parameters that we have to follow.
I understand that. I guess my question would be, and you can add, you talked about meetings with them, because reading the MOU is very specific. I can say it's strict or specific, whichever S word you want to use, and on there, and it says these parameters, and it needs to meet, I forget what it said, 6 or 7 of the 10 or 11 or 12 or whatever it was. And just know a lot of the, you can meet 8 of the 10 with a dedicated telehealth center in that facility, and just to open it up. What I'm trying to do and bring and even push is make sure that as many kids as possible to this GEAR money. And what we're talking about with the other that we talked about when Commissioner Tanner was here, I think is outside of that box. It doesn't, because we were talking about specifically mental health and doing that. And yes, I know I said they haven't made the decision on that yet. That's fine. But I think that's a separate box, a subset of those GEAR funds when I read the MOU between it and what they said. Now, reading it and having conversations, obviously those are two different things. And if they've said no to that, then no. But I would be willing to advocate drastically and loudly for that, so that the kids that live in the rural parts, and had this discussion with some folks this morning at the Eggs and Issues, whether you're in Bainbridge or Barneyville, Georgia.
Or
to have this-
Santa Claus, Georgia.
Or,
So
or
I get
Santa
where you're
Claus,
coming from.
or Bethlehem. Well, Bethlehem's between Athens and they've got access now. But no, so that we can try to help those kids in those rural districts. I mean, that's, whether it's, I'm starting to get off the box for a moment, but I want us to use and push and help push y'all to use as much flexibility as we can to get as much of that money and those resources to those kids as we can, and not saying that, oh, well, here's our box and we got to play in it. Let's ask and try to get that done, because this is a lot of money that I'm glad to see movement. Really glad to see movement. And again, like I said, Clark County, I think, would be a great place for a brick and mortar one, and be sustainable, potentially sustainable. But these funds have been sitting here for a long time, and it's not trying to be critical of that, but I want to use these federal funds to benefit as many kids, rural kids in the state of Georgia as possible.
And we've pushed the box as much as we can. That's why you've seen the numbers increase over. It's not using all the money, but we've shared the information around telehealth and the request for that. They came back to us and say they want to have some internal discussions on that. So I think that points out that they don't see that currently in the MOU as an allowable thing. They're open to that. But I think we want to make sure we all have a shared goal in making sure services get to students. I know the governor's office has that same goal, and the best way to do that is in partnership with them. So we want to make sure we keep that partnership.
So, and I do realize that in the discussions we had several months ago when we started rolling these out, and the ones we're adding here, that they're wanting to do them in places where they're a little bit easier to set up and they can fit these goals. But, Clark County's got a lot of medical resources.
Yes.
Okay? And so I think that I understand we're building this out, but I think that we need to keep ongoing discussions, because getting rural health care to children is very important. It's not unlike what Superintendent Woods was able to do in the early part of his time as superintendent, getting school nurses back into these schools in the 20 counties that didn't have any doctors in them. I mean, that was a huge step forward for those kids to be able to get that kind of care. So we just need to always keep an eye on it. I understand it's easier to do it where you've already got stuff, but we got to do the hard stuff too.
Two things. There's a local health group in my area who's providing school-based health services through a bus. So they're not going in through the big brick and mortar. They bought a very large bus, and they're taking the clinic to the school. So that is a compromise of having, potentially, a compromise of having a brick and mortar building. You can have the building move to the school. So if that's the first thing. Second thing is a question for staff. The term of this contract is the same, but it's increasing 250% as far as the allocation. So I'm curious where the first number came from and what the additional money is going for.
I can speak to that. The initial contract for Emory, as I mentioned, is ESSER funded, as is this amendment. The initial contract was set up for the training for our existing grantees, so to put some sustainability training in place for those that have already moved through the planning year, so that they get that training that they needed, so that they can help keep their school-based health centers open and running as long as possible. And it was also for that train the trainer cost that I mentioned. This amendment is for the technical assistance costs for our upcoming cohort of planning grantees. So our internal school-based health center team, along with the staff from Emory, a couple of them meet monthly with all of our grantees individually, because each district needs unique individualized support for this. It takes a lot of manpower and practice to be able to kind of coach them through all these obstacles. So that's what, there's a handful of staff members over at Emory that, as I mentioned before, really subject matter experts in this space, have been doing it for 20, 30 years. And so they help to provide that technical assistance along with our team. So that's what these costs are for.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Objections? All right, we move item 11 to the consent agenda. Item 12.
All right, item 12 is a grant for safer Georgia Schools Round 2. The purpose of this grant is to award 58 LEAs funding to create safe and healthy learning environments for all students. The total grant is not to exceed $10,038,202.
What number was that? I'm sorry.
12.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
One question. So the amounts are very different. So they applied for these and then the awards are based on what they applied for. This isn't like a set amount block grant for everybody.
Correct. Yeah. Mary Lauren, do you want to?
Yeah. Yes, correct. Districts have the opportunity to apply for between $50,000 and $250,000 new grantees. So as you just said, the awards are based on the allowability of their budgets. We did have several repeat grantees this time. We allowed districts that were awarded in round 1 to reapply if they could meet an amount between what they had been awarded in round 1 and 250. So you'll see some round 1 repeat grantees that have maybe lower award amounts than some of the others.
Thank you.
Of course.
Any other questions? Any objections? Okay, item 12 will be moved to the consent agenda. Item 13.
All right, item 13 is our school-based health center renovation grants for Clark County School System. These grant funds, in alignment with the governor's school-based health center initiative and support, will provide renovation and infrastructure funds for SBHCs at Coyle Middle School and Classic City High School in Clark County. The total grant is not to exceed $616,000.
Thank you. Any questions? Any objections? Thank you. Item 13 will be moved to the consent agenda. And I guess that's it for the budget committee. Do you have any commentary for 14 or 15?
Yeah, items 14 and 15 are our 50 to 250 contracts. If there's any questions on those, or we also have our 50 to 250 grants and grant amendments.
Okay. No questions, no objectives. Items 14 and 15 will be moved to the consent agenda. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
So I believe that items 1 through 15 will be moved to the consent agenda
Yes, sir.
tomorrow.
Yes, all consent and the governor.
Setting the bar really high. And we're under time too. So I know Matt's a little jealous about that.
I think Matt was doing everything he could to extend it.
He was trying to sabotage.
Right. We've got about 5 minutes before we can start our Charter and District Flexibility Committee meeting. So we'll reconvene at 1:45. get all of our board members back on the table. Time for the District Flexibility and Charter Schools Committee meeting, and I'll turn it over to Chairman Scott Sweeney. Mr. Sweeney, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and we miss you on the District Flexibility and Charter Schools Committee with your recent promotion to chair. And we also welcome Kenneth Mason as the vice chair for the District Flexibility and Charter Schools Committee. We'll move on to item number 1 and turn this over to Ms.
Item number 1 on the agenda is a request to adopt a rule amendment to State Board Rule 160-5-1-.33, strategic waivers, and Title 20 no waiver school systems. This rule is being amended to incorporate the following changes: to update the contract terms section of the rule to align the strategic waivers accountability provisions with state law and Georgia's amended Every Student Succeeds Act state plan as approved by the U.S. Department of Education, to incorporate language related to the requirements of local education agencies to maintain or achieve financial stability in accordance with the Official Code of Georgia annotated section 20-2-67 or Senate Bill 68 from the 2020 legislative session, and to provide general cleanup and edits to update agency and legal references. At the December 2023 meeting, the State Board approved the initiation of this rule to be posted for public review and comment, and the rule has been posted for at least 30 days.
Fantastic. Are there any questions? Helen? I can just tell you got a question.
Well, I've got some, I do have some questions, and it relates to, so did we get any feedback on this?
We got a couple of feedback comments on the rule. They were both supportive of the rule adjustment.
They were what?
They were both supportive of the rule changes.
Okay, well, on some of the rule changes, and Kenneth, I have already spoken with you, there is things that have been scratched out, and I'm not why, and some of the things we've taken GOSA out, and I don't even know if we've talked to GOSA regarding some of the responsibility, but we've left them in on some things, and there's a lot here that deals with state board rule and policy changes, and if I'm looking at this and I'm trying to understand it, and it's not that I want to deter anything, I just want to make sure that that we understand some of the things that are really taken out. On one of the pages it talks, we took out the contracts beginning July 1, but I guess those expired, right? On page 3.
Right, because they have specific dates aligned.
On those, yeah, I understand
that
that.
expired, so that's why we
But
took
what was
those
the
out.
partnership contract?
So, I'm sorry?
What was the partnership contract that we took out? It was on page 3, I think.
It was a category of.
Right, it's just changing the category.
Well,
So it's
what
not,
was
the
it
category is
though?
not called partnership contract.
What is it called now?
It's still a partnership contract, but the category there is not partnership contract. So you still have essentially a contract for strategic waivers.
But we have contracts that are dealing with charter and dealing with Swiss.
Right, this is just for Swiss.
Okay, and so we used to do, it took out in one place the 3% growth?
Yes.
So help me
So
with
the
that a
reason
little
for
bit.
that is because, remember, the 3% growth was based on the overall single score, which is why we removed that language, because that language was all aligned specifically to the overall single score. There's no longer overall single score. So we just adjusted the language in the rule so that it can align both to state law, which is broader, as well as the new ESSA plan. So this whole rule, the accountability portion, was all based on the old ESSA plan. And there's not a way to do the 3% on the single score without a single score.
All right, but how are we gonna determine, in some of our, target schools and all, the bottom 5%, so how are we gonna determine things?
I think that's what Allison is.
Right, that's what Allison
Yeah.
tried to do this
CCRP.
morning for.
Okay, but we
For the, I'm sorry. For the areas that you mentioned related to where we took GOSA out, we only removed them from the places in 2020, during the 2020 legislative session in Senate Bill 68. GOSA was replaced by DOE for the monitoring aspect of the contracts. And so all we did was make those changes that happened from Senate Bill 68, but all of the other places where GOSA remains stayed in place within the rule.
And that was in 2020?
2020 session.
Okay, so all the Exhibit Cs and Exhibit Bs and things that dealt with school plan and targets and all, we've removed that and we put performance in there for accountability, right?
Right, so essentially we remove quote-unquote exhibits, such that we aren't bound to having to collect all these attachments. We'll still gather the information, but having them stated in rule that they have to be called Exhibit C, or they have to be called Exhibit D, or they have to be called Exhibit A, just makes for a tedious review and collection process.
But we recommended, GOSA in the 5th year, GOSA does an evaluation, or was that when we removed also? You know, the first and second year, it says accountability performances, and then it said based on the 3rd and 4th accountability performance. Then it's based upon the GOSA evaluation of the 5th year accountability performance. That was on page 6. I mean, have we even have we talked to GOSA regarding this? Are they familiar with what's taken in and taken? Well, I see GOSA out there. Hey.
We've had conversations with GOSA about the changes related to the accountability. Obviously, like I said, the changes that were made here related to GOSA actually took place in law in 2020. So we've had conversations with them in 2020 about that when the changes happened at that time. So we're just updating. We haven't updated the rule in 2020 when those changes happened, but now particularly we just wanted to go ahead and get that cleanup done.
Well, okay, all right. Then, so strategic waivers, and they're still answering, Charter is still answering to TCSG with some of their funding, right?
The College and Career Academies, yes.
Okay. And instead of, and DOE is going to monitor all of the SWISI now?
Yes.
And then you're gonna report it to the state board?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, who are the two Title 20 no waiver school systems? I think I know.
Webster and Beaufort.
Beaufort City.
Beaufort City and Webster, okay. Have we heard anything from them?
We have not.
Okay.
There weren't any changes to that section related to them, so.
Well, I saw that. I just didn't know if we haven't had any conversation on this in so long. It was just so.
Yeah, and I think our conversation was cleared up by Dr. Timberlake re-explaining revised CCRPI. And now if you look at this rule with what you said about cleaning up the language, does clarify it from, you know, that re-envisioning of accountability as well. So I think that's, so yeah, let's look at that red line again, just so you can go through.
Because there's a lot in here. There's a lot that is changing, and there's things that have been left out and re-evaluated. And, I mean, it was a lot for me, and I've been here a long time, so.
I'll be willing to sit on going back to it.
Those of you that are joining us virtually, could you please mute?
They might be discussing this. Okay.
No, it's the 706 number.
All right, are there any other questions? If hearing none, and because this is the adoption, we would propose this as a separate vote, because there is a hearing scheduled on this tomorrow. If any of you have any questions, again, this has been posted already, so it would be up for adoption, and with the posting, that was up for at least a 30-day period. If you have questions, please direct them to Ms. Taylor between now and tomorrow, when we will consider this for adoption. And we'll move on to the next item. Item number 2.
Item number 2 on the agenda is a request to renew the charter system contract for Commerce City Schools. Commerce City Schools is seeking a renewal of their charter system contract. The Commerce City Schools Board of Education approved the charter system renewal petition on September 11, 2023. Commerce City Schools' mission is to ensure that they do everything possible to help each child maximize achievement and establish a pattern of lifelong learning. Commerce City utilizes its flexibility to integrate and embed professional development opportunities for all teachers, paras, and administrators to maximize technology applications for learning and to increase career path options for all students. If approved, Commerce City's new contract would begin July 1st, 2024, and expire June 30th, 2029.
All right, thank you, Ms. Taylor. Is there anybody here from Commerce City Schools?
We have Dr. Joy Talbert, Superintendent of Commerce City Schools, and some members of her team online.
You said Dr. Joy Talbert?
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Talbert, thank you very much for being here today. We'd love to hear your comments regarding your wonderful school.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having us. We're excited to be asking for a charter renewal. We actually became a charter system back in December of 2013. And so we have been at this for about 10 years now, and I've been fortunate to be superintendent for all of those. And so as a charter system, we have had great success academically and also working with our school governance teams.
Fantastic. Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Talbert, her team? Okay, hearing none, can we make a recommendation to move this to our consent agenda? Great, without objection. Thank you very much, and good luck, and we'll be voting on this tomorrow on our consent agenda.
Okay, thank you, sir, very much.
All right. Ms. Taylor, we'll move on to item number 3 for Hart County Schools.
Item number 3 is a request to amend the charter system contract for Hart County Schools to extend its charter term to June 30th, 2025. This one-year contract extension will allow Hart County Schools to align its charter system renewal with its district accreditation review. If approved, the Hart County Schools contract will expire as stated on June 30th, 2025.
Terrific. And is there anyone here with
No.
Hart? Okay. I had a chance to talk with Ms. Taylor. Again, this is just a one-year extension for this for accreditation purposes. Does anybody have any questions? All right, without objection, we'll move this to the consent agenda. And then item number 4, Ms. Taylor.
Item number 4 is a request to approve the superintendent appointment for the Zone 7 Completion Special School. The Official Code of Georgia Annotated, Section 20-2-2096.5, requires the State Board of Education to appoint a superintendent for each completion special school upon consideration of one or more recommendations from the state school superintendent and such school's governing board. The governing board of the Zone 7 Completion Special School voted to recommend Dr. Roland Cummings to serve as the superintendent of the Zone 7 Completion Special School for a 3-year term. Dr. Cummings is the former superintendent of Mitchell County Schools, as well as a former Georgia middle school and high school principal. We do have online the RISA directors for Zone 7, Mr. Wes Taylor with Coastal Plains RISA, and Mr. Jason Miller with Southwest Georgia, if you have any questions.
Does anybody have any questions with regard to this appointment? I'm not hearing any questions. So can we move this to the consent agenda?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ms. Taylor. That concludes the business of the District Flexibility and Charter Schools Committee. Do you have something else?
No.
Okay. Mr. Chair,
So,
we'll be moving number 1 for a separate vote, items 2, 3, and 4 to the consent agenda.
all right. All right. That sounds great. We do not have a State Schools Committee meeting today. So we are done with District Flexibility and Charter. We will reconvene tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, for the Committee of the Whole. I think all of you are aware that we've restructured the agenda just slightly. Any reports that we have, whether it's the superintendent report, and of course Superintendent Williams gave his today with the update to CCRPI, and we've now had some more conversation about the flexibility rule so that those are consistent with each other. We will not have a chair's report tomorrow. But when we do have those, they will occur after the approval of the consent agenda and the action item agenda. And while they're printing that up, instead of just taking a recess, and we'll have reports typically during that portion, and we'll finish our day taking votes on action items, and then we're done. All right? So with that, I want to thank all of you for your attention today, for making this first day on the job a little bit less stressful than I expected it to be. And thank you for all of you who have joined us today. Thank you, staff. And we will see you in the morning at 9 o'clock. We're adjourned.